And as I've subtitled this, as you can see, a mere list, because the Protestation Oath returns are just a list of men aged 18 and over who either took the oath or refused to take the oath. So,
excuse me, Tony, sorry to interrupt. Ron, you need to click on that continue because it's over this screen.
Continue.
Yeah.
So what continue?
It's saying the meeting is being recorded.
Yes.
You click continue and it'll go away.
Yeah.
I haven't got it, but yeah.
All right. Sorry, apologies.
No, it's all right. So in this talk, I wanted to explain how useful these returns can be, even if you've not got back to 1642. And I will give you some examples of how you can actually use the returns. One thing to be aware of is that all these events are taking place before we had the modern calendar. In 1641, 1642, New Year's Day was on the 25th of March. So any date in January, February, or March prior to that was, as this is showing, 1641, and any date after the 25th of March is 1642. But for this talk, I've converted all of the dates into the modern form. This is an example of one of the returns. This is the returns for the hamlet of Birtle, which was in the parish of Middleton. And as you can see, it's just a mere list. And as you can see at the bottom, all these are now in the House of Lords. I remember once attending a talk at Lancashire Record Office. This was several years ago, where the archivist said it's important for all us family historians to bear in mind that any of the records that we use were never produced with us in mind. And it's important to wring out as much information as we can. I'm sure he wasn't meaning you get hold of the records and give them a good twist like this, but as you can see later on in this talk, just from a list of names, you can get a large amount of information. Protestation Oath returns owe their existence to the political crisis that England was faced in the late spring and early summer of 1641. Like Charles I had been ruling the country between 1629 and 1640 without the need of Parliament. One of his strong men, his right-hand man, was the Earl of Stafford. He had been the Lord Lieutenant in Ireland and had recently been recalled to help Charles fight a war against the Scots. The war was quite disastrous for Stafford. It was expensive and he wasn't getting anywhere in terms of winning against Scotland. So when Parliament was eventually recalled in 1640, there was a big push to get the Earl of Stafford sentenced for treason. And he had been arrested and was incarcerated in the Tower of London. There was the tension in London in particular was quite high because there were rumours that Charles was trying to get an Irish army, an Irish Catholic army, to break into the Tower of London and release Stafford. And at this time, John Pym, a member of Parliament, was pushing for the execution of Stafford, which was later carried out. On the 28th of August, 1641, this was when the Commons heard about this possible plan to use a Catholic army, and there was uproar in the House of Commons when someone declared that the king needed good counsellors around him. And as a result of that, a committee of 10 members of Parliament was drawn up and produced what became the Protestation Oath. These are the main aims behind the oath, that anyone taking the oath was saying that they would maintain and defend the true Reformed Protestant religion. They had to defend the king. They had to defend Parliament. And one thing within it was that if you refused, it was almost certain that you were going to be identified as Catholic. And at this time in England, Catholics were considered to be the troublemakers. Like, it's interesting that the final bit was to preserve the union and peace between the three kingdoms of England, Scotland, and Ireland. And this is the Protestation Oath as it was written out. The House of Commons tried to get this enforced throughout the country in 1641. But the bill to allow that to happen didn't get through the House of Lords. But the Commons decided that members of the House of Commons had to take the oath, and somehow, even without an act of Parliament, they launched it nationwide. It's taken by people within the City of London, and there are early examples of the protestation being taken in Essex, Kent, and Cornwall. But there's no mention of Lancashire. But there's this return from the parish of Radcliffe. When the rector was taking the 1642 Protestation Oath, he appended this sort of note to it that's dated the 30th of May, 1641, which is more or less saying to the House of Commons, you've already asked me to do this, which I did, and I sent it back to you, but I'm doing it again. And we've taken it again on the 20th of February, 1642. So some returns must have been made in Lancashire, but where they ended up, no one knows. After the disturbance of 1641, things became fairly quiet until Charles I attempted to break in the House of Commons and arrest 10 members of the Commons. And as a result, it was the Speaker of the House of Commons decided to issue the protestation nationwide. And this is the letter that accompanies the protestation oath that we are talking about. The Speaker's letter asks for the sheriff and JPs for each county to meet together and take the oath, and then call together ministers, constables, church wardens, and overseers of each parish, and for them to take the oath, and then for the ministers to go back and administer the oath and return all of the protestation oaths back to the Commons. And when the oaths were returned to the House of Commons, there was a committee set up to examine them with the idea of identifying where the Catholics were within the country. So the sheriff for the county, the JPs met together. Then you had the ministers, constables, church wardens, etc. for the parishes. And then it went down to the individual parishes. So for Lancashire, what happened was you had the officers for parishes close together like Bolton and Dean, where the clergymen, constables, church wardens, a similar thing for Bury and Radcliffe, and all the separate parishes in Manchester area, like Manchester Parish, Salford Parish, Parish of Eccles and Prestwich, all met together, took the oath, and then they went back to the individual parishes. It seemed to be quite well organised. If you think of what the road systems must have been like in 1642, you had a letter from the Speaker going out on the 1st of February. The first return, well, the first dated return for Lancashire for the individual parishes was this one for Lee that happened on the 20th of February. And the rest of the individual townships that make up Lee Parish took it 4 days later. This is an interesting return for Wigan. With the preamble that went back with the return, the Mayor of Wigan is making certain that people down in London knew that he took every effort to get everyone in Wigan to take the oath. And if anyone in Wigan said, well, I wasn't aware, well, there was no excuse because it was taken on the 17th of February. And that was the Sunday even prayers. Then if you couldn't attend that, you could take it on the following Wednesday, Thursday, or the following Sunday. So no one in Wigan could actually say, I was too busy to attend the church to take the oath. Now, we all know if you ask someone to do something, they either do it or they decide they can do something better, or they just turn up at the wrong place at the wrong time. And these are two examples that Roger Haydock, his son Richard, and Elizabeth, his wife, and Alice, his daughter, who lived in Chorley, which was part of Croston Parish, for some reason decided to go off and take the Protestation Oath at Eccleston. So the minister there is writing back to Chorley saying, these people came, they've taken the oath, so, cross them off your list. And also you've got an example of someone in Chorley going off to Manchester to take the oath. Now, just bear in mind, we've got several people here living in Chorley, leaving the town and going somewhere else. And there may be a reason for that, as we'll come on to later. But if you look at all the textbooks, they will say that the Protestation Oath was taken by men. And here we've got 2 women taking it. And if you look at the guide produced by Jeremy Gibson, he says that in his experience, the Lancashire returns are the most interesting he's seen. And as we'll see later, there are a significant number of women named in the Lancashire returns. So it's not just men. Now, some people couldn't get to church, and in some returns, this is an example, they give reasons why people were unable to attend. One person was away from home. Another one was impotent, which had a different meaning in those days as it does now. It was too weak to attend. 2, there were no reasons given. 3, there were Catholics. 3 were in London. Another 3 were absent. 4, not able to come, but we don't know why. And there were 8 people on the sick bed, again, unable to attend. And these are some examples that you see. Sort of Richard Marsden was bedridden. Richard Walker was deaf and blind, so maybe he couldn't hear the call to attend. I feel sorry for Robert Holding, who was not just poor, but also impotent. And Robert Lowe wasn't just sick, but very sick. I don't know if you attended the talk that was given in the Society about nonconformist records, but one useful thing is that the Protestation Oaths can possibly identify which of your ancestors were Catholic at the time. But you need to just be careful, because as the oath seemed to be drawn up in such a way to identify Catholics, and knowing how they've been persecuted in the past, maybe if you were Catholic, you thought better of it than not to refuse and just took the oath so that you could have a quiet life later on. But this is an example for Brindle Parish, where 72 people took the oath, 85 people refused, and they were identified as Catholics, and another 5 who came to church but absented themselves from taking the oath. I think it's interesting to just consider for a moment how the oath was taken, because these were taken in February and March. And as was seen from example previously, a lot of them were taken at even prayer. So you're in a dark church, lit by just candlelight, And if everyone had to read out this oath, and of course, a lot of people at that time couldn't read, so have it read out to them and then say, I agree or not, would take quite a lot of time. So it's possible that the clergyman read out the oath from the pulpit and said, right, everyone who agrees go to the left, and all those who disagree go to the right. Then someone would then record their names. No one knows really how the oath was administered, but I can't see it being read word for word by individuals taking the oath. A lot of the Lancashire parishes are quite large, so it might have been difficult for people to attend the actual parish church, but they may have gone to the local chapel of ease. So if you look at the Bury parish, if you lived in the Tottington area, you could either go to the parish church itself or attend Holcombe Chapel, or even Edenfield Chapel. And they were all taken on different dates. So every effort was made to make certain people could attend. One interesting thing, why all the oaths seem to just think of men, because in the letter that the speaker sends out, and the bit I've highlighted, there is no mention for men. It's householders and others, being 18 and upwards. So no mention of men, but the Lancashire returns, as I said, are really interesting because there's a lot of women named in them. Not all returns have got women's names. It could be, as I said earlier, that some clergymen think, well, I can do it better than you've asked for. So in the terms of Eccleston Parish, you've got 730 names, and just less than half of them are women. And a similar thing for Hoole Parish, 208 names with 44% of women named. Maybe I need to just put a little bit of a warning on that. A lot of the returns do actually name women by Alice or Mary. Some just say wife of Fred Bloggs. So, but they are there, whether by name or implied. But it's interesting to think, why did they pick the age of 18? Because this time, 16 was considered to be the age by which you could join the army, etc. And for Dean Parish, it seems like the minister there didn't read the speaker's letter carefully enough at first, because he writes that these are the several persons aged above 16 within the hamlets of the parish of Dean. Then if you look at Dean Parish returns, he crosses out the age 16 and writes in 18. And it is one of the interesting unknown reasons why 18 was picked rather than 16, because if you look at the poll tax that was taken in 1660, it was all based on the age of 16. If you were single, you had to pay a poll tax of 6p, and if you were married, the poll tax was a shilling, but it was on everyone age 16 and over. But as I said, after the returns were taken, they all made their way back to the House of Commons, and a committee was set up to examine them and with a view to identifying the Catholics, so people could keep careful watch on what they were up to. But not much happened with the returns, because shortly after they got back to the House of Commons, the country was taken over by the Civil War, and the Protestation Oath returns got lost. For one reason or another, they got moved to the House of Lords, where they're now in the record office of the House of Lords. If they weren't moved, they would almost certainly have been destroyed in the fire that destroyed the House of Commons in 1834. And it wasn't until 1876 that the Protestation Oath's returns were eventually rediscovered. I first heard about these when I was living and working in London and attended a talk at the Society of Genealogists. And they seemed interesting, so I made an appointment and attended the record office in the House of Lords. And it was the best record office I've ever been in. Nice leather seats for you to sit in. You ordered the documents. You didn't have to go and collect them from a desk. They were brought to you. You had the feeling that you finally arrived in the House of Lords. I don't know what the arrangements are these days, but I'll give you a website at the end. One thing that you can put these records to is estimating the population of the area that you may be interested in. If you take Hull, you've got the numbers who took it, those who refused. But if you just concentrate on the number of men, and then if you know what the estimate of people aged 18 and over, you can do some rough calculations and work out the population of the parish that you're interested in. The easiest way, some historians recommend that if you sort of multiply the number of men by either 3.5 or 3.25, you get an estimate of the population. Now, I don't know if there's anyone at the talk who are familiar with Hull Parish, whether that particular estimation for the population seems about right. But it's one way of working out the size of the area that your ancestors may have lived in. And this is another example, giving a population estimate between just over 400, just less than 450 up to just over 500. As I said earlier, the Lancashire returns are interesting because not only have you got men and women, but you have occupations. I'm sure some people thought, well, I can do this better than you've asked for. I'll tell you what people's occupations were. So I looked at Chorley, and these are the common occupations within the Chorley returns. And within Chorley, there was one bone setter. So I don't know why they needed a bone setter in Chorley. Maybe someone who lives there can say why at the end, but maybe with my sense of humour, it just seemed a bit of a wild town, and maybe that's the reason why people were leaving that we saw earlier on. But you can look at Rivington, which is not too far away from Chorley, and you can see that the occupations are slightly different. So again, it gives you some flavour of what that particular town was like. Clayton-le Moors, again, different types of occupations. Now, there are people at the talk who will recognise this church as Croston Parish Church. And for me, the Croston returns are the most interesting ones. Like if you look at the textbooks, they will tell you that the Protestation Oaths returns are almost like a mid-17th century census, although it's just mainly men. But Croston Parish are really, really good. It is like a census. You've got them arranged in family groups, everyone aged 18 and over. So the first return, you've got the rector there with his wife and his two daughters and his two servants. Then later on, you've got Hugh Norris with his wife and his two sons. I just wish all the Lancashire returns are like this, but that I've only seen that in Croston. You can use the returns to look at the frequency of names. Now, when I moved back to Lancashire, I started attending the Bury branch meetings. And at the beginning of a meeting, the secretary would read out letters that they may have received from members or non-members saying, you know, I need help with researching. And one type of letter that always got, well, for me, a strange response was if they mentioned, I need help researching the Kay family of Bury. Everyone would go, oh no, Kay. And this happened quite frequently. And then I asked why. What's this thing with Kay family in Bury? And they said, well, don't you know, it's a commonest name in Bury. And yet, if you look in 1642, if you're on the world famous Bury Market, you'd almost be bumping into Kays left, right, and centre. And if not, you will be bumping into families of Holt. My interests are in Darwin, and at this time that was over Darwin. And if you look at the families in Blackburn and also Twistle, all very close together, it's interesting that you find a difference. In Blackburn, the commonest name was Bolton and Worley. And in Darwin, over Darwin, you've got Walsh as a commonest. And just 4 miles difference and there's a difference in frequencies of names. So this can help if you're trying to find where your family may have come from. And looking at Oswald, again, a different makeup of names, with Tomlinson being the commonest. And one member who knew I was doing this talk and who's with us tonight contacted me and asked, are these available online for searching? And because I've been transcribing the Lancashire returns, and within maybe the next 6 months, they'll be on the Society's website for download for a small payment. And within the email, he said, he's interested in Henry Eccles, who married Mary Woods, and those are the dates he's got. They were both born in Wood Plumpton, and Mary's parents were Henry Wood and Jane Gregson. And when you look at Wood Plumpton returns, there's no family called Eccles there at all. And Gregson, there was 2, and they were both referred to as Mr. Gregson. So they must have been a family of some importance. So it helped Tom to know that, right, it's no good looking at Wood Plumpton back in 1642 trying to find a family called Eccles. Some of the names, you've got aliases by them. So John Whittaker, alias Dad. I just wonder if John Whittaker's wife knew everyone that was calling him Dad when they met him in the street. Or why did John Eastwood acquire the alias of Good Sir? So that there's a lot of interesting things you can wring out from these returns. And if you're connected to some of the important Lancashire families, you may be able to work out how important they were by the number of servants they had. So Ralph Ashton of Whalley, a mere 22 servants. But Thomas Walmsley of Duncan House could boast, I've got 10 more servants than you have. Charles Townley of Townley, just a mere 6. As we said, these can be useful for working out where the Catholic families were. And if you look, because the returns are first of all divided by the 100, so Longsdale 100, Amounderness, Blackburn, Leyland, Salford, West Derby 100, and then within the 100 by the parish. Now, if you've got any ancestors living in the Longsdale 100, don't bother looking for the Protestation oaths because they don't exist. The returns for West Derby are very, very patchy indeed. But for the rest, you've got a virtually complete set of returns. And these are the percentage of men who refuse to take the oath. So you can see that the Amounderness and Leyland hundreds had quite a number of Catholic families there, but not so in Blackburn, and certainly not in the Salford 100. You can look at each parish in turn, and this is Leyland Parish. Sorry, Leyland 100 with the different parishes. And again, you can work out in those parishes where you had the highest percentage of Catholic families. So as we've already seen, Brindle, a number of Catholic families there, followed by Eccleston. But again, remember the possibility that a number of Catholics may have taken the oath just to hope that they get away with it and they're not going to be identified later on. So, and again, this is an example for Preston. I've put Fulwood in red because at this time, Fulwood, although it's part of Preston now, wasn't part of Preston Parish. One of the peculiar things about Lancashire, you had some townships that were connected to a distant parish. Fulwood is an example. Fulwood was part of Lancaster Parish. But again, within there, you can see that the centre of Preston, not many Catholic families, but most of the Catholic families are around the centre part of Preston. If you are interested in returns for other counties, this is a map of England, and it's important to say that these are just English documents, and the shaded areas show where the returns have survived. So if you've got ancestors in Yorkshire, well, apart from a small area, the rest is blank, and there's nothing survived for Wales. There are various theories of why some returns have never survived. As I said, they were moved from the House of Commons to the House of Lords, and certainly in that move, they may have simply got lost. Sort of, you can imagine it could be quite easy for them to be misplaced. They still may be there somewhere waiting to be discovered. Another theory is that, well, if the sheriff who was taking the returns back to London knew that they were possibly there to identify Catholics, and if the sheriff had sympathy for the Catholic population in the area, somehow they may have slipped out of his saddlebag on the way back to London, but no one knows. But they are there for you to examine. In the parliamentary archives, they have been digitized, and that's the website where you will find all of the returns. It depends how good you are at reading 17th century handwriting. But as I said, the Lancashire returns will be made available on the Society's website as a download. But hopefully, as we come to the end of the talk, you'll appreciate that the returns are not just a mere list of names, but you are able to get a vast amount of information out of them by just ringing them for all they're worth. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony.
Yes, thank you, Tony. I've come back.
Right, where's everyone?
Well, you need to come out of your the green bit at the top.
Yeah,
You need
right.
to come out of your display.
I thought I've done that.
Still there.
It's still
Right,
there.
what?
I don't think it's absolutely essential. If you go to full screen and then go to your standard view.
Yeah.
Gallery, if you wish.
I'm completely no. Right. Well, I'm just having difficulty. Wait,
I think if you close your presentation down and if Ron stops sharing the screen, it might work.
Right.
Right. I'll wait for Ron.
I've just got it down to 1. That's it.
Oh, wow.
There we are.
Well done.
Good.
Well done.
If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. Whether I can answer them is another matter.
Tony,
Yeah.
what sort of punishment would you get if you didn't take the oath then?
I don't know. Your name was just recorded, and if it wasn't for the Civil War, we may know the answer. There was no punishment set down. It was just that your name was recorded, and what they were going to do with it later on, no one knows, apart from identifying the troublemakers in the country.
That'd be what it was before.
Thank you.
Identification.
A year or two back, Tony, a good number of years in fact, there was a publication on the Lancashire Protestation Oath, wasn't there? A red booklet, I seem to recollect. What sort of information was on that? Was it the full transcript or?
I can't remember that. There was
I think it was
someone
by the Federation, or I think.
Oh, right. There was a publication by the Federation, this Jeremy Gibson guide. I don't know if you're meaning that's got a, I think from memory, a greenish cover. It covers, it lists all the protestation oaths that have survived, county by county, and other tax records for the 17th century. But, but it doesn't name anyone. It just says whether they've survived and whether they've been published or not. Like anyone from Westmoreland is fortunate because all those returns have been published. And in the Gibson guide.
Jeannie's holding up a copy of it down there.
That's the Gibson guide, isn't it?
What, who's holding it up?
Jean.
Jean, it's a Gibson
Yeah, that's
guide.
it. That's
That's
it.
the green one. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's still available on the Society's website. I think there is a listing of Federation publications. So if anyone wants a copy, have a look.
Hi, Tony.
Hello.
Hello. I got a question actually. as a Catholic, I'm interested to know if at that time Catholic church were banned from or so. What was the role of the Catholic Church and how people the relationship between Catholic and non-Catholic were at the time in this particular situation? I know that after Henry VIII, was a little bit mess situation, but I would like in this particular situation, what happened to Catholics?
Right. Well, the problem in the country, the religion kept changing after Henry VIII, depending on who was on the throne. But there were no Catholic churches. Catholics tended to meet secretly. And if you look in a lot of the old large houses, you'll find that they had priest holes, secret compartments built into the fabric of the building that Catholic priests could hide. And certainly there are lots of examples where Catholic priests coming over from the continent, if they were caught, they were subject to quite horrendous sort of punishment, like hanging, drawing, and quartering. I'm not very good on Catholic records, and I'm sure there's someone in the group who will be able to tell you when Catholic churches were first able to be built. And
it was around the time of the French Revolution, because they started coming over from France. That's when Stonyhurst became a college. George III permitted the people at, oh crikey, where was it? Down south somewhere, a castle, which is now ruined, to build a Catholic chapel, but it hadn't to look like a chapel. But it's actually round like a tower.
The first Catholic,
Lulworth Castle, I think.
1778 was the first Catholic Relief Act.
There you are, 1778. Yeah.
Yeah. Before that time, it was illegal to be a Catholic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It stopped people though, did it?
No, it didn't, no, especially not in Lancashire.
Yeah.
Pauline, did you say Lulworth?
I think it's Lulworth Castle, yeah. I think so. But the chapel's still standing, but the castle is ruined. I think it is.
Right.
Yeah, George III gave them special permission. That's why, if you think about it, St. Peter and St. Paul at Maudsley, the one at Samlesbury on the left as you go up the hill towards Blackburn from the M6, they look like barns. They look like farms without buildings. They happen to look like churches. So.
This is Tom in California. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Catholic, and I did a little research on my family in Lancashire, and I learned that some of my family used the private chapel in the manor house in Lytham.
Yeah.
It was the Clifton Manor House, and it's still there. And there's an old part of the manor house still in existence, and it is the tea room now, a public tea room. And that tea room was the original chapel of the manor house. And I learned that local Catholics used that chapel, and some of whom were my ancestors who were married or baptized there.
Yeah. We have a story in Eccleston. Oh no, it's not Catholic, sorry, it's the Church of England during the Commonwealth. So it's not appropriate at the moment. So
again, the very first Catholic churches had to be built out 5 miles outside the main town.
Yeah, 5 Mile Act, as did Protestant nonconformists. We've got one close to us at Tunley. It's 1662, is it? Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could be in the main towns.
Yeah. So quite interesting when you look at it. There's a. Have you ever been round Chingle? Any of you? Near Goosner, Chingle Hall.
A long time ago.
Sorry.
A long time ago.
Yeah, that was a very strong Catholic centre. It was a mass centre with Chingle Hall. And they used to have the mass centres where the priest would go and people would go for the mass. So,
In the porch, they had a very small window, sort of 6-inch square window. And they used to put a candle in there to the people came along. They would know whether it was safe to go in or not.
we have, and there are priest holes there. There's a hole under the floor that looks like it could have been a fireplace. I don't know where they used to put the. I think it was the altar furniture. You know, the chalices and that sort of thing. And there's a preaching cross that was hidden behind. It's on the wall. It was hidden behind a tapestry, and they did all sorts. There's even a place we visited it, not this last summer, a couple of years ago, and the priest hole could take, I think it was 12 priests, but it was the old sewer, so it would have been very pleasant down there, wouldn't it?
Unpleasant, really.
Yeah. So, but yeah, we certainly have our share of Catholic saints here, don't we, in Lancashire? From that time.
St. John's.
Can I just say something? I have an ancestor, John Sargent, who was a priest in Scorton. He built Scorton Church at the end of the 1700s.
Right.
And before that, he went round as a watch clock and watchmaker. That he pretended to do that, but actually he was going to houses and saying mass. And he was sent to France to train as a priest, because at that time in the early 1700s you weren't allowed to be a doctor, a teacher, any profession. So he was actually sent to France to train as a priest, and then came back. If anybody can remind me the name of the hall north of Scorton, just south of Lancaster. He worked in the little chapel there.
Oh,
Thurnham Hall, yes. So I've been and had a look at the priest hall there. So he was secretly saying mass there, and then eventually was allowed, but built a small church, but it's now actually there's Catholic church in Scorton. But his story is interesting. So for the gentleman that asked before, sometimes they did other things to be in secret, but they were around. There were a lot of large Catholic families.
Oh yeah, yeah.
In the county of Lancaster, with it being a little bit away from everywhere else, they seem to get away with the Catholic houses here. Seem to get away with it much longer than elsewhere in the country.
Yeah. Andrew Todd, who used to speak to us, said, if you think about Lancashire, he said, to the east, you've got the Pennines, which cuts you off from the Yorkshire area. To the north, you've got the Lake District, which cuts you off from up there. To the south, you have the Mersey, which only had one bridge over it until 1700 and something, the whole length of it. And to the east, to the west, you've got the sea and the Fylde, which is boggy. You've got all bogs and marshes. He said it was like the Wild West here, but yeah, everything was, we were enclosed quite securely in a lot of respects here in Lancashire, which is why you did have this Catholic, the Catholic religion carrying on here so strongly. You know, you've got Samsbury Hall, haven't you? The Southwest and everything, and so it was very, very strong in Lancashire, but we were cushioned in a lot of respects. Yeah, it's so difficult. Sorry, go on, Val.
Well, there's a lot of story to John Sargent, but I wanted to ask Tony another question, if that was all right.
No problem.
yesterday I was going through the Greystoke registers. Now that's up up near Penrith, so it's not Lancashire. But I found it was about in the 1680s, a whole list of people that were excommunicated, that the vicar had put the list. So that wasn't the Protestation oaths, but were they still collecting lists of people who wouldn't actually put the hand up and say,
You can be excommunicated in the Church of England.
yes, they were Church of England, but I'm wondering why, what was that list? Why were they excommunicated?
They'd obviously been naughty. I don't know why, but they could be that they hadn't been to church for several months.
When was William of Orange?
The
When was William of Orange? When did he become king? Because the question was finally settled with when James II was chucked out, and his daughter Mary came to the throne with her husband William of Orange.
Oh, 1689.
Sorry?
1689.
Was it 89?
So it's about it could well be
Got it
around
on
that time because that's all to do with
Val,
the
Val, this
Yes.
list that you found,
Yes.
where was the list?
In the actual register, the book, I was looking at the book online. So
Right.
it was, the vicar had, kept a list of all what had been going on, and it was his list of people that were excommunicated, about half a page of them.
It just says excommunicated.
Yes, yeah.
Because the one I know is in Blackburn Parish Register. There is a list, and I think it's around about 1680, where the vicar.
That's the same date, yeah.
Where the vicar makes a list of baptisms of those who didn't attend the Church of England. They were all, I can't remember how he phrased it, but they were all non-conformist baptisms.
Yeah, 1689 was the Toleration Act, which permitted non-conformists to worship, but not Catholics, provided they licensed their meeting places. So they would have refused to go to the Church of England church. So they'd have been Quakers or Jews or Brethren or something else, probably
Right.
Quakers, because that was the Toleration Act. They didn't allow Catholics to have their own church, but other religions, non-conformists, they did. So that's why they would have been listed and they'd have been excommunicated and fined.
Right,
for
so
not
they're
going to
listed in the
church.
Church of England
Yeah, excommunicated.
register.
Yeah.
Right.
It was
Okay.
quite common, really, to list other religions because they refused to come to church,
Right.
and they probably wouldn't have paid their tithes either.
Right, I knew about the Catholics. I just wondered
Yeah.
why they were caught, why they were excommunicated in that way as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Quite
they were
didn't go to
persuasive in that
excommunicated.
area.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
But this book is very useful.
Oh,
Oh
UK timeline to family history. So
Okay.
you could, and it's from when is it, from 1100 up to present day, and it lists all the acts and everything that affected family history.
I've got that one.
UK
Yeah, so
timeline to family historians. Let's get it written down.
UK timeline of family historians, Angela Smith and can't read it upside down.
Bertram,
yeah.
Neil Bertram.
Yeah.
Who's published it?
It's the book Forge.
Thank you.
Yeah, the book Forge.
Neil Bertram.
Yeah.
The book Forge.
Angela Smith.
And
Could
Neil
I ask,
Bertram.
could I ask that information be sent out in an email to the General Society so I can get a copy of the name of the publication and so forth?
Oh, okay. I'll email it to one of you, to Tony. Go on. Yeah.
Could you have the ISBN number as well, please?
Okay.
Because that's what libraries go off a lot of the time.
And
It's best to email the information to Ron, isn't it? Ron and Pauline.
Yeah.
yeah, then Ron, will you send it out through the forum?
Oh, if I put it on the forum, because I can do the forum, otherwise I haven't got other people's
Yeah,
email
well,
address.
if you put it on the forum, Tom,
Okay.
who's asked the question, who wanted the details, is on the forum. So
Okay.
it's a good plug for anyone who's not attending the meeting, not on the forum, to join it immediately. You know what you're missing. Because it's just a pity, some of this discussion, we can't get out to these people who believe that everything you want these days on family history is on the web, and there's no need to join a family history society.
Yeah.
It's, how do you convert these people?
With difficulty, I think, Tony.
Yeah.
Well, it's not, you know, it's not just computers. You can get it on your phone and everything.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's mobile.
I mean, that's useful. A little ruler. I'll put it up in the National Archives, and it's just a ruler, and it's got all the kings and queens of England on.
Wow.
And
That's brilliant.
inches and centimeters on the other side. Yeah, you
I've got one of those.
Very useful, aren't they?
Yeah,
Be
very.
careful
yeah,
now. There's
very
all those
useful.
books behind you.
Yeah.
Yeah, all my family history books. Yeah. British history rulers.
Wow, that's really good.
It was about, I don't know, £2 or something.
Right.
Not much.
Right, stop the recording now.